All right, let's take a look at warm-up 37. All right, to divide fractions, change to multiplication, use the reciprocal. So 1/2 times the reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3. 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. And if I simplify 4/6, what do I get? Talon? How many thirds? 2/3, yes. 2/3, because I divided both numerator and denominator by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 2/3 is your answer. All right, B, 1/2 times 2/3, so it's 1/2. Change the division to multiplication. 2/3, the reciprocal is 3/2. Multiply straight across. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. 3/4. Is that in simplest form? How do I know? They are counting neighbors. When I count 1, 2, 3, 4, they are side by side. That means there is no number that would go into both of them besides 1. They would have to be 2 apart for 2 to go into them. So if numbers are counting neighbors, they are in simplest form. Write an integer to describe each situation. The temperature is 15 degrees below 0. That integer we said is -15. A running back gains 7 yards from the end zone. If you gain, that's a what? Positive or negative number? Positive, so the integer is just 7. Could you write +7? You could. But then you kind of look like you don't really know what you're doing in math. A positive number, you do not have to write the plus sign. How much, let's change this to coffee. How much coffee will each person get if 3 people share a ½ pound of coffee? We're sharing this. This is what we're splitting, so that comes first. 1/2 divided by 3 people is 3/1. Keep, change, and flip. 1/2 times 1/3. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 3 is 6. So how much would each person get? They would get 1/6 of a pound of coffee. 1/6 each person would get 1/6 pound of coffee. All right. Make sure word problems have words in the answer. Any questions? All right, so let's go to, in our math book, I think it was page 444. Yes, 444 in your math book. All right, so what do we remember from the lesson yesterday about solving addition equations, one-step equations? So before we even look at page 444, I want to look at a problem that looks like this. How are we going to solve a one-step equation that is an addition one-step equation? Anybody remember? What do you think? We're going to solve it with the inverse operation, which is subtraction. And remember, an equation is like a balance. What you do on one side, you have to do to the other side. So, if this is x, this is a number plus 6, well, the inverse is subtracting 6. We want the x to be by itself. So we've got to get rid of adding 6, so we need to subtract 6 from this side. And we also need to subtract 6 from this side. So we are left with x. 6 minus 6 goes away. Bring your equal sign down. 12 minus 6 is 6. So x equals 6. Then you need to check it. If x equals 6, use substitution and change that x to a 6. 6 plus 6 equals 12. And 6 plus 6 is 12. So 12 does equal 12. And I've checked it. All right. What happens if my variable is on the other side? What if I had 36 equals 8 plus a number? Is it any different? Am I going to solve that any differently? So what do I need to have by itself, or what do I need to isolate? Well, I need to know what the n is. So I've got to get rid of this plus 8 over here, or a positive 8. How do I get rid of this 8 right here? What am I going to do? Because I don't see a plus sign in front of it. But using the commutative property, this is n plus 8. So what's the opposite of adding 8? Subtract 8 from both sides. And you are left with n, this goes away, equals 36 minus 8. Anybody have an idea of what that is? 28. And then check it. 36 equals 8 plus 28. 36 equals, and then I would use my calculator and say 8 plus 8, that is going to be 36. Check, right? Everybody remember doing that yesterday? This is what you have to do on all of the problems today. The word problems, a lot of them, you were going to have to come up with your own equation. And remember, that's what we're struggling with. All right, so let's all look at number 1 on page 444. Y plus 7 equals 10. So what are we going to do? What's the opposite of adding 7? We're going to subtract 7 from both sides. And we're going to say y, 7 minus 7 is 0, so it just goes away, equals 10 minus 7 is 3. So y equals 3. And then the directions say check your solution. So I'm going to use substitution, rewrite, but I'm going to change the y to a 3. 3 plus 7 equals 10. 3 plus 7 is 10, so 10 does equal 10. Check. All right. Number 2. What needs to be by itself on one side of the equal sign? What are we trying to get by itself? The e. The e needs to be by itself. So I've got to get rid of this 6 plus 6. What do I need to do? I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. That's your answer when I ask you, what am I going to do to get this e by itself? You're going to say, I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. What you do on one side, you have to do to the other. So, subtract 6, subtract 6. 10 minus 6 is 4, equals, that goes away, is an e. 4 equals e, or e equals 4. Check with substitution. That means here where the e is, I've got to change that to a 4. 10 equals 6 plus 4. Does 10 equal 10? What is 6 plus 4? 10. 10 does equal 10. You must check your solutions. All right. We've got a word problem here we need to tackle. A board that measures 19.5 meters in length is cut into 2 pieces. One piece measures 7 2/10 meters. Write and solve an equation to find the length of the other piece. So I've got to write an equation before I can solve the problem. Lots of people want to go ahead and solve it and then write an equation. This equation needs to have a variable. So what this is telling me is there's a board. We did a problem like this yesterday. The whole board is 19 5/10 meters long. It says it's cut into 2 pieces. One piece is 7 2/10 meters. what is the length of this one? What is the length of that? So, what might my equation look like? So, I've got to add these two things together, right? If I add those together, that should equal that. So, I'm going to say the length plus 7 2/10 equals 19 5/10. You should have an equation that looks like that. These two, when you add them together, it has to equal that total. Your variable can be whatever you want. I just chose L because we're talking about a length of wood. That's an L. Now can I solve that? If you were to do this problem and only tell me a number answer without writing an equation, that would be wrong. This is the 6th grade standard, being able to write an equation and solve it. So I'm going to subtract 7 2/10, subtract 7 2/10. You're left with the length, that goes away, equals, that's a 3, 12 3/10 meters. So you need to have length plus 7.2 equals 19.5. So you have to write the equation, and then I would say the length of the other piece is 12.3 meters. You need to have an equation, and then you need to solve it, and a word problem needs to have words in the answer, correct? Okay. All right, any questions on 3? All right, let's look at 4. It takes 43 facial muscles to frown. This is 26 more than it takes to smile. Write and solve an equation to find the number of muscles it takes to frown. Or it takes to smile, I'm sorry. So when you're working on equations, one-step equations, and we're working on all of them at the same time, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and you see a problem like this, and you don't know what operation it is that you need to use, you're going to have to think, if I'm solving this problem, what's the math I'm going to do to solve the problem? Not to write the equation. What's the math you need to do to solve this problem? You know it's 43 to frown. And it takes, this is 26 more than it takes to smile. So what's the difference? What's the math I'm going to have to do if I need to find the difference? Yes? I'm going to have to subtract. So if I'm going to have to subtract, I know the math I'm going to do is subtract. My equation needs to be the inverse operation. What's the inverse of subtract? Add. The equation I'm going to write has to be add because I know that I'm going to need to subtract. If you can think about it that way and think about you need to figure out the math first, then you can write your equation the opposite. So it takes 26 plus something else, more muscles, to equal 43. 26 plus more muscles equal 43. Now I'm going to need to subtract. That goes away. So the muscles equal 17 muscles. Because 26 plus 17 equals 43. 26 plus 17 is 43, and 43 equals 43. So make sure that you check it. So what do I need to write on the line? Write and solve an equation to find the number of muscles. it takes. So the equation that I wrote was 26 plus m equals 43. And then my answer is, write and solve an equation to find the number of muscles it takes to smile. It takes, how many muscles to smile? 17. It takes 17 muscles to smile. So, if I am being completely honest with you, solving the addition equations, doing this, is not real difficult once you learn the math. Once you learn the steps, this is not difficult. What part of this lesson is difficult? Figuring out an equation to write in a word problem is the really difficult part. It takes lots of practice. And in my experience from teaching 6th and 7th grade math for years and years and years, you're going to master this pretty easily. The word problems are going to be what's difficult. And what I see typically is when you have a page of math problems, lots of students solve these, and then when they get to the word problems, they skip them, and they come back and they're like, I didn't understand it. I couldn't do it. You cannot figure it out unless you try. You're not going to get better at it unless you try to figure it out. Write an equation, solve it, and see if the answer makes sense. If the answer doesn't make sense, did you write the equation correctly? No. Then try something else. But you cannot just keep coming back to me and going, I don't know how to do it, and you didn't even start the math problem. Really, really, really try. This skill is not going to go away. It's not going to be something that we're looking at it today and then next week you don't know how to do it, and we're not going to look at it again. You're going to keep seeing writing equations coming back around and back around and back around all this year, all next year, all through 8th grade. So the time to do the hard work is now. All right, so you're working on your independent practice. Let's see. Page 445, problems 1 through 6. 445, 1 through 6. After you do, let me look at it. After you do 1 through 3, bring it to me and let me see. 1 through 3, let me see. And then go back, work on 4, do 4, bring it back to let me see, and then you can work on your own. On the back, you're working on problems 7, 8, 9, and 13. You are skipping 10, 11, and 12 on the back. All of the front, skipping 10, 11, and 12 on the back. And when do I want to see your work? After 3, and then again after 4.